Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel, Canada Immigration. We hope you're doing great. In this video, we will talk about Indian students' protest against Canada's immigration policy changes over deportation fears and how Indian students, facing deportation, are fighting to stay back in Canada. In recent months, a wave of protests has emerged among Indian students in Canada, sparked by concerns over new immigration policy changes that threaten their status and future in the country. The changes, which have raised fears of deportation among many international students, have ignited a widespread outcry as students rally together to voice their apprehensions. The protests underscore the growing tension between educational aspirations and immigration policies in Canada. If you are interested in this topic, to get all the information, pay attention and watch the video through to the end. Please hit like and subscribe, and don't forget to push the notification bell for an upcoming video. So, without any further delay, let's jump into the video. Hundreds of Indian students in Canada have taken to the streets to protest recent changes to the country's immigration policies, fearing deportation. In addition, over 70,000 international students across Canada have mobilized in large numbers against the federal policy changes. Many of these students, who arrived with hopes of building new lives, are now expressing their frustration on the streets. The new changes announced by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government, including restrictions on study permits, have increased the risk of deportation for these students. The policy changes have had a severe impact on these students. Many who intended to apply for permanent residency after completing their studies are now burdened with significant debt and broken dreams. The situation has become critical as new provincial policies call for a 25% reduction in permanent residency nominations, leaving many students at risk of deportation. A former international student facing deportation expressed his dismay. "I spent the most crucial 6 years of my life taking many risks to come to Canada. I studied, I worked, I paid taxes, I earned enough CRS, comprehensive ranking system, points, but the government has just taken advantage of us. Why Canada is reducing temporary foreign workers number." On Monday, the Canadian government announced that it will significantly reduce the number of temporary foreign workers it accepts, reversing expansions made in 2022. This decision comes as Justin Trudeau's government grapples with rising concerns about the number of temporary residents. Trudeau's cabinet is also considering cuts to permanent residency streams. We're looking at the various streams to make sure that as we move forward, remains a place that is positive in its support for immigration, but also responsible in the way we integrate and make sure there are pathways to success for everyone who comes to Canada, Canadian PM said. The new changes will end low-wage temporary foreign workers in communities with an unemployment rate of 6% or higher, reduce the percentage of low-wage temporary foreign workers employers can hire to 10%. And shorten the duration of low-wage temporary foreign worker permits from 2 years to 1. As the protests continue to gain momentum, the future of Indian students in Canada remains uncertain. The clamor for policy reassessment highlights the urgent need for a dialogue between policymakers and the student community to address these concerns. The outcome of this struggle will not only impact those directly involved but could also set a precedent for how Canada handles international student immigration policies moving forward. How Indian students, facing deportation, are fighting to stay back in Canada. Thousands of Indian students, facing the risk of being deported by the end of this year, are holding protests across Canada. From where did the protests start and which provinces are engulfed by the agitation? What are the demands of these students? Across Canada, over 70,000 international student graduates now face the risk being deported due to recent changes in federal immigration policies. Protests are sweeping through Canadian cities as international students and skilled workers rally for their rights, demanding changes in immigration policy that could determine whether they stay in the country they've come to call their home or are forced to leave. From the bustling streets of Ontario to the picturesque landscapes of Prince Edward Island, PEI, these demonstrations highlight the growing frustration and anxiety among those who came to Canada with the promise of a better future, only to find themselves caught in a web of bureaucratic red tape and increasingly uncertain immigration pathways. The situation has become particularly dire due to new provincial policies that have introduced a 25% reduction in permanent residency nominations, leaving many students unexpectedly vulnerable. This was the case in Pei, from where several Indian students had to return. The protests by Indian students have spread to 4 Canadian provinces: Ontario, Manitoba, Prince Edward Island, PEI, and British Columbia, BC. The agitation started first in Pei in May. It is no secret that Canada saw hordes of students joining its private universities because of the country's easy citizenship process. Lakhs of Indian students, dreaming of relocating to North America or Europe, use the study visa route. The Canadian government knew it all this while, but allowed that massive migration because the students were also helping its gig economy. India's Ministry of External Affairs reports that approximately 2.8 million Indians, including 1.8 million people of Indian origin, now reside in Canada. The rising number of international students has placed significant pressure on Canada's housing, healthcare, and other services. How Canada is trying to keep off immigrants. When Canadians began protesting over the pressure on housing and hospitals because of the surge in immigrants, the government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau began a sudden crackdown. It imposed a 2-year cap to manage this growth. This cap is expected to result in around 360,000 approved study permits in 2024, representing a 35% reduction from the previous year, according to Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, IRCC. Mark Miller, Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, announced that starting June 21, foreign nationals can no longer apply for a post-graduation work permit, PGWP, at the border. This decision targets flag polling, a practice where temporary residents exit and re-enter Canada to expedite work or study permit applications. The PGWP is crucial for international students seeking employment and permanent residency. Protests are taking place across the country, with students setting up camps and holding rallies in provinces like Prince Edward Island, PEI, Ontario, Winnipeg, and British Columbia. Just 2 days back, on August 26, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also announced a reduction in the number of temporary foreign workers employed in low-wage jobs. The Canadian government will halt the processing of labour market impact assessments, LMIAs, for the low-wage stream in areas with an unemployment rate of 6% or higher, with exceptions for jobs in agriculture, food processing, construction, and healthcare. Why Indian students in Canada are feeling cheated. I spent 6 years taking risks to come to Canada. I studied, worked, paid taxes, and earned enough comprehensive ranking system, CRS, points, but the government has taken advantage of us, said Mayakdeep Singh, a former international student facing deportation, told City News Toronto. Singh, who invested his family's life savings in tuition, is now confronting a daunting deadline with no guarantee of permanent residency. The international students are calling on the government to extend postgraduate work permits, establish clear and consistent pathways to permanent residency, and address the systemic issues contributing to their exploitation. The fight for permanent residency. One of the central issues driving these protests is the call for an increase in Provincial Nominee Program, PNP, slots. The PNP allows provinces and territories to nominate individuals for permanent residency based on their skills, work experience, and potential to contribute to the local economy. However, the number of slots available is limited, and the competition is fierce. Prince Edward Island, PEI, Canada's smallest province, announced a 25% reduction in immigration permits, leading to widespread protests from hundreds of Indian students who are now facing deportation. The student protest started on May 9 and is still active after 110 days. They say the sudden changes by the Canadian province to the immigration policy have left them with an uncertain future. Canadian provinces seeing protests by Indian students. In cities like Vancouver and Winnipeg, protests have erupted, with demonstrators urging the government to increase the number of PNP slots to give more international students and temporary workers a chance to secure permanent residency. At the rally, international students chanted slogans like "Good enough to work, good enough to stay and don't blame us, fix your system," according to CBC News. They called for more fairness in how people are selected for the Provincial Nominee Program, which is currently based on a ranking system rather than random selection. Baljinder Singh, a permanent resident, expressed his support at the rally, stating that he believes international students and workers are not being treated fairly. Once skilled workers began fulfilling the requirements to complete their pathway, the government suddenly changed the process, he said. That's not fair. What's next for international students? As protests continue to unfold across the country, the Canadian government faces mounting pressure to address the concerns of international students and temporary foreign workers. The calls for increased PNP slots, faster processing times, and more draws are growing louder, as are the demands for better protection against exploitation and more transparent immigration policies. That is all for today, in this video. What are your thoughts on this? Please let us know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching the entire video. Hopefully, the information is useful to you. See you later, in the next video. Till then, take care.